Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Divers and water lovers, what is something you've found underwater that you couldn't explain or scared the hell out of you? Serious. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I don't know if this counts, but I'm a water lover, so maybe so. While water skiing in the lake one time, Louisiana, when I flew off, I landed pretty much on top of an alligator. I kind of felt my leg hit him, and we were eye to eye when I gasped for air. Then he went under. The moments after that were the most terrifying moments of my life, because I was so certain I'd feel him bite my foot any second and drag me under. I started screaming, and couldn't stop until the boat was back to me. You don't realize how long 2 to 3 minutes is until you're alone in the open water. Never again for me. I was 8 or 9 and snorkeling in Hawaii. I returned around in only a couple feet of water and a turtle rammed me full speed in the face. Scared the hell out of me and broke my goggles. Didn't know what the hell it was doing. I was diving with some friends and found a fisherman's glove with a hand still inside it. Ugh. We brought the glove to the local police and they told us that they hadn't received any kind of report of a guy with a missing hand. Ugh. When I was a younger man, I used to live in Bora Bora, and I free-dived and saw a few of these. Really scary animals. I was diving in Thailand, and we were at a site diving where there were 2 steep hills underwater full of rock formations, coral, etc. Between these 2 areas was a sandy bottom with scattered rocks ranging between the 1 to 5 meters across, all full of holes and full of life. We were swimming from one hill to the next and inspecting these rocks along the way. I was swimming along one large one when I got whacked in the side of my stomach very hard. It startled the shit out of me, and I quickly back off. The dive instructor noticed and came around, and we inspected what happened. That's when we saw a gigantic moray eel. I'm later told it was a giant moray. He was absolutely massive, never seen one so big, was easily a couple meters in length, and was probably as wide as my head. We assume I had passed too close without noticing, and he attacked. He bit my BCD and luckily didn't persist. I was diving a spearfishing spot about 30 miles offshore. I was 60 feet underwater. There I was, swimming along, when I noticed this school of mahi-mahi. There were about 30, maybe 40 of them. These fish were all between 2 and 5 feet long. They were so beautiful with their sides flashing all different colors that when I felt the tug on my leg, I looked down at my leg to see a 12-foot tiger shark pulling on my dive fin and taking me along for the ride. In a second, he had ripped the fin off my foot. The shark then swam away but kept circling just at visual range. I think he was still curious about how I tasted. I kept an eye on him the whole time I was swimming back to the boat. Scariest moment I've ever had in the water. I was diving off the Florence, Oregon coast with some friends and we found a body on the ocean floor in the creepiest condition possible. He was a surfer who'd gone missing a few days prior, so he wore a wetsuit with his legs, arms, and head exposed. Crabs had eaten the flesh from his exposed bits, so basically he was a torso with a skull and skeletal limbs. The creepiest dive of my life though, 2 buddies of mine and I were on a night dive in the Puget Sound hunting prawns. It was about 1 a.m., and we're a good 100 feet deep, the pitchest black you could imagine. We used to do this thing on night dives where we'd get in a circle, turn off our lights, then stir up the water and watch the bioluminescence float around us like floating stars in a black watery space. Beautiful. Only this one time we turn off our lights, stir up the water, and the water glows just enough to reveal a 4th person sitting in our circle. We were at a dive resort, so it wasn't so odd to see another diver, only it was 1 a.m. We'd seen no one else prepping a dive at the dock. He was also alone, which was odd considering the dangerous conditions of a night dive in those waters, and he had no fins or gloves. I don't know how he swam so well without fins, or didn't get hypothermia without boots or gloves. We wore dry suits because it was so cold, but this dude was in a wetsuit with exposed skin, and we thought we saw a giant gash in one of his legs. So, the 3 of us all notice him, and we're too effing scared to move. I can hear my buddies panting in their regs, and the guy just smiles and waves, then swims away. That was 100 times creepier than Skeleton Dude. Whenever you think you're alone and someone just shows up, like in an alley at night, it's weird as F. 100 feet underwater at night is terrifying. I like kayaking when I get the chance, but one day in a lake up in Glacier National Park, Montana, the most beautiful place I've ever been, and I totally recommend it, when I saw a small boat, a little vintage-looking tiny motorboat, the little tiny mini speedboat you always see in 70s movies set in Miami or something, just a few feet underwater, perfectly preserved. I could reach down and touch it. There were no signs of damage, no sign of why it sunk. It was strangely eerie. I had to leave because for some reason it just freaked me out. The idea that something could sit inches from the air but still submerged for years, probably. It made me so uncomfortable, and I don't know why. I was diving in Bermuda, 85 feet down, coming out of the wheelhouse of an old fishing boat. I felt something start tapping my hand, turn my head with thoughts of all kinds of horrible, terrifying sea creatures reaching out to grab my hand, and see a tiny little fish flinging itself into my hand and waving its fin at me as if to say, "Get out of my house, go on, scram." That was when I discovered you could laugh through a regulator. South Floridian here. I grew up fishing and diving, which has led to a few notable stories. The one that sticks out the most was during my high school years. I had just taken a deep breath and gone down to a reef about 30 or so feet below. My friend was still on the boat above, and we were the only ones on the reef. I got down to the bottom and noticed a thin, upright pole. Upon closer inspection, it was indeed a normal fishing pole, but old and rotten under the water for so long. Right as I was going to grab the pole, it was pulled from my hands, just shooting up and away, as if being reeled in by the other side. It was gone within a matter of seconds, so I started my resurface expecting to see another boat responsible. No boats, nothing in sight, but of course, just my friend and his boat. I had never bothered telling him because he would have never believed me anyway. The only explanation I might have is that the pole was still attached to a fish or something, although I doubt it. Still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. When I was younger, I used to dive and snorkel a lot in the Florida Keys. On one trip, I think I was snorkeling, I was swimming, and everything was great until I spotted a group of big barracudas. So, I've run into small sharks and eels while diving, and I'm generally fearless, but I stopped in terror when I saw the barracudas. One in particular was closest to me, while the rest of the group was a little further. He turned a bit and made eye contact with me. They have been known to attack divers, so I swam away slowly. Luckily, they didn't come towards me. I don't think there was a real chance that they would have attacked me, but it was the most worried for my safety that I'd been ever while diving. I think what was the scariest to me was that the sharks and eels had basically ignored me, but the barracuda looked at me, seemed to think about me, and then decided, "Nah, you can go." Phew. So what do you think caused this phenomenon? I was diving off the coast of Fiji, and we went through a natural tunnel, like a 10-meter cave passage through a rock formation. So we start swimming through the cave, and suddenly the lights were weird, like the blue tint from the water had been replaced by a red one. Now all divers will know that this isn't only weird because the color changed, but also because red is the first color to disappear after a certain depth, usually between 30 feet 10 meters and 40 feet 13 meters, and we were over 70 feet 23 meters deep. Also, bear in mind, this was late morning on a sunny day. So imagine this scene. Me and my dive buddy are going through an underwater cave, and suddenly everything, for no apparent reason, is tinted red, a color that you are literally supposed to be unable to see while diving at that depth during the day. Upon exiting the cave, everything was back to blue. I thought it was just me, so I didn't signal to go back up. After the dive, my buddy asked me if I'd seen the water tint red too. We can't explain it, and the folks from the local dive shop had no idea what we were talking about. Scuba diver here. Once I was going along a common route between two underwater waypoints when I found a small, shiny object in the sand. I recognized it as part of the assembly which fits on the top of the air tank and connects to a breathing regulator. Now this is something you can't breathe without, so it creeped the hell out of me to think about the story of how such a crucial item ended up there. Down in La Jolla, California, they have caves along the coast that you can swim through if the tides are right. This particular day, the water level was high enough that you could swim through this one cave that was pretty narrow. Well, it's my turn to swim, and when I'm halfway through, a set of waves comes in and clears the cave while I'm still in it. I was smashed against the side of the cave, bloodied up the back of my shoulders pretty good. But we're thinking, well, shit. We just got in the water, we were planning on swimming out to a buoy and then back to shore. So I just say, F it, let's do it. Exposed wound in an area known for great white sightings, no big deal. Gotta get a workout in. Well, we get to the buoy, and I just have the biggest sense of dread. We're probably a good 15-minute swim from shore, and I start thinking about this wound on my arm just leaking shark bait into the giant vast ocean full of stuff that probably wants to eat me. Sure enough, I'm looking down, and I see something swimming towards me. It's dark. I'm like, what the F? What the F? What the F? And I started swimming away from it. And I turn around too, and I see two more of the same thing coming at me from different directions. My face goes completely white. I'm expected to get grabbed and pulled under and never seen again. Nothing happens. My friends can see the look on my face, and they're asking me what happened. We all decide to swim in together. My friends were all better swimmers than me, but on that day, I beat them all back to the shore easily. I'm practically kissing the sand when I finally made it to the shore, and this old man comes up to me and says, "You shouldn't be swimming with that cut on your arm. You're attracting sharks." On one of my night dives at the Flower Garden Banks Marine Sanctuary in either 2005 or 2006, had my first encounter with a bearded sea cucumber. I thought I stepped out of the real world and into a science fiction fantasy world, seeing this long worm with tentacles surrounding its mouth like a cross between a snake and an octopus. Very scary initially. Now I look for them because they are pretty cool. On a more recent dive this spring, although I knew I was going to see it, the whole purpose of the dive after all, finding the 3-year-old 80-pound golden lab that had been swept away in the spring floods and trapped in debris under a bridge scared the heck out of me when I first found her body visually. Knowing you are looking for it and actually finding it are two different things, but at least I was able to bring her body home for her family. I grew up diving, as my family owned a dive shop. I've done all over the globe, but the thing that creeped me out the most happened on my local lake. I was about 10 and had taken our ski boat from the deck to a secluded cove to look for an abandoned cemetery. The lake was created by TVA in the 30s and displaced an entire town, leaving several places like this lost in the trees with no access. When I got onto the shore, I found a blanket with all the edges tied together to make a bundle. I didn't open it, but did some exploratory poking. There was obviously a cinder block in there, and the rest was just squishy. After a particularly vigorous poke, blood started seeping through the blanket. I hauled my little ass back to the boat and never looked back. Decades later, I still think about that and wonder what was in there. On a lighter note, our shop got a lot of business retrieving dropped items and speedboats that idiots would sink. My dad was the shop's master instructor and normally passed these jobs on to me or one of the regulars. However, he took one job in January to test his new dry suit and took along one of his friends. I was their gear tote and waited on shore. Dad came up first and started telling me about this weird-looking fishing lure he'd found while sifting through the silt. About that time, the buddy surfaces and asks Dad why he was playing with that tampon for so long. I had an awesome childhood. I was kneeboarding one time in a lake not too far outside of my hometown. The water is very murky and dark. Well, the front end of the board dipped downward into the water, but I kept holding onto the rope. I shot probably a good 20 plus feet deep in a matter of a couple of seconds, and when I let go, I completely lost my place in space. It was pitch black, and I couldn't tell if right side up or upside down. Didn't really find anything scary, but being that lost in space is truly terrifying. Started buying more buoyant life jackets from that point forward. Was doing a drift dive in Mexico, saw a very large grouper off in the distance, let myself drift toward it. I soon realized it was far bigger than I had thought, and I was putting myself in danger, possibly. This thing could have taken me down too far or damaged my gear or knocked me out. I've seen videos of these things eating 4-foot sharks, and this bad boy was bigger than the ones in the video. I was a bit shaken after that dive. I was snorkeling in the Caribbean, and I got separated from the rest of the group. We had been sticking close to the shore to look at the small fish and things, touristy stuff. I stayed behind to look at a small school of fish, and when I looked up, they were all the way ahead of me. To catch up, I took a shortcut across deep water. I was swimming along for a while, not seeing any fish or anything, when I just saw a murky outline in the distance. You know, when you're looking at something underwater from a distance and it's just a shape, like that. But it was huge, easily bigger than me, just slowly swimming parallel with me. I didn't take the time to investigate it closer and just swam to the shore as fast as I could. Still gives me chills when I think about it. I swam out into the middle of a lake in northern Wisconsin on a warm summer day. I was floating on my back, just relaxing. After a bit, I started thinking about how deep the water was, and then about a horror movie I'd recently seen that featured a giant monster bursting up through the water in a lake, not unlike the one that I was floating in. I started to feel kind of nervous. Suddenly, I heard the most god-awful roar as if the lake was exploding beneath me. Terrified, I bolted up to tread water, only to see the trailing smoke from an SAC fighter jet that was practically flying under radar. This next one seems like a real cool and unique experience. Also, I wouldn't want to do it. Diving in Palau once, and we're about 100 feet. There's a wall on one side of us, and then the ocean just drops as far as the eye can see on the other side. A tiger shark pulled up next to us and just started swimming next to me like I'm his dive buddy or something. At first I didn't care, but after a few minutes I started to feel uncomfortable. We kept looking at each other, and he was a good 6 foot, if not a bit more. After a few minutes, a school of yellowfin tuna appeared near us, and all of a sudden that shark decided he wanted one, and just dive-bombed one, cut one of those tuna in half in a split second. A couple more sharks appeared and cleaned up the rest, and they all swam off quietly like you do. Made me realize how lightning fast those things are, and absolutely badass.